Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. This is the podcast to listen to if you're an aspiring writer or an author who wants to be more successful. On this show, you'll learn how to write and launch a book successfully, all from the top authors and people just like you who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the author of the book called Published, and the CEO of selfpublishing.com. For free training on how to publish a book that sells 10,000 copies, go to selfpublishing.com/free training. Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is my new friend, Mary Lawless Lee. Mary, she's a mother, she's a writer, she's an entrepreneur and a digital media personality. She runs a fashion and lifestyle blog. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you're one of the millions of followers that's part of her Happily Gray lifestyle and fashion blog. She's also an author of the book. By the time you're seeing this, it will either have just came out or be about to come out. And so the book's called Happily Gray. You can see it here. This is an advance reader copy. This is not for sale. And I had to keep this. Funny, Mary. I had to keep this for my girlfriend so I could have it for this interview. She's
that's awesome.
a nurse, worked in the ICU, grew up in Texas, likes Fleetwood Mac. I'm going through this book. I'm like,
that's awesome.
Aubrey, you've got to read like this. This is you. You have so much in common with this girl. So it's really, really cool. So I'm excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. This is an honor, and I've been nerding out in book world for the last 2 years. So I'm excited to kind of talk about like the back end process of creating a book and bringing it to life. Thank you so much.
We were talking before this. This is a unique kind of behind the scenes. A lot of the podcasts are talking about the content of the book. Today, we get to talk about the book and the behind the scenes on writing it, marketing it, launching it, all that stuff. So I'm excited to dive in. I guess for starters, why a book? Like, how does this fit in with you've got this successful brand, you've got the Instagram following, you've got the blog, like all of these things. Why a book?
So for me, well, one, I'll start kind of as a little girl. I loved writing. I journaled. I mean, I remember at like 12 years old, being up at 1 a.m. past bedtime, past my parents already put me in bed, and I'm up at 1 a.m. writing. I love to write. It always was a place of connection and safety and comfort. And it was just such a practice that has carried me all through life. And that's the reason why I started my brand Happily Gray in the first place. Literally paid one of my friends $50, created the website just so I could start writing about fashion. I was very, very into fashion and still am. And so that was really kind of the passion. It was a passion project. And it's always carried me through life. And I just knew, having a brand on social media, and, social media can always feel like a highlight reel, one side of the story. And some of these other kind of more messy parts of my life and speaking more into the journey of kind of getting there, I knew I wanted to write a book and reserve some of those more vulnerable, special stories for a sacred place to be able to open up this conversation and community and connection on social media. And so this has just always been kind of a big picture dream of mine. I remember 7 years ago telling my management team the first day I signed with them, I want to write a book. Of all the long-term goals, I really want to write a book. And we have been down this journey, pitching to publishers and talking about this idea for so long. And finally the right proposition came our way. And so it's been exciting because this really is something that my heart was passionate about and something I wanted to pursue. And specifically the why behind this book is really about being able to tell the other side of the story. I think it's really important with the culture and social media world that we live in, that women, specifically women, this book is written for women, that they see all sides of the story. They see that, it's not just the pretty picture. There's messiness, there's hardships, there's, the parts that, the struggles of just getting there in the journey. And so this book really leans into some of those stories that, people don't know about my life. And so I hope that, I really hope that women will feel seen and heard and understood. I hope that they'll identify with some of these stories and, and ultimately just not feel as alone in, whatever journey and path that they're on.
That's awesome. And so I guess as you look at this through the lens of, your blog and business and stuff, we always talk about there's the purpose for the reader and then there's the purpose for the author. And it's important that you nail both, right? So that you have a great book that helps people, and then you have a great book that fulfills the intention that you as the author has. Do you see this as, was this more of like a, hey, this is a passion project on the side thing? Is this more of a like, hey, I view this as a core piece of the business that's going to really drive the brand and the following? Like, how does it fit in with kind of your business goals?
So, a little bit of both, but I do think business wise, I think that the number one goal with this book was connection, building deeper connections. I come from a background of
Mm,
nursing. I was a critical care nurse prior to kind of like falling in this digital world and pursuing my passion. And a lot of that meaning and connection and a lot of that foundation that I had with nursing, I wanted to find that same meaning in what I'm doing now in this digital world.
oh,
And
interesting.
I
Yeah.
I really felt like being able to tell the other side of my story and being able to step into that vulnerability would open the door for that connection with other women. And like I said, it's always been something I knew I would do. I didn't know what it would look like, but I knew it's at some point I would do it in some capacity in
Yeah.
order to be able to connect with women. So definitely an intentional piece of the brand in order to broaden our community and create deeper connections.
That's cool. And you mentioned ever since you were little writing and knowing that you wanted to do this for a long time, writing this book.
Mhm.
Why now? What was the spark where it's like, okay, now is the time to write and publish this book?
I've done a lot of work. I mean, a lot of these, to not get too deep into these stories, a lot of these stories are very vulnerable. And I've had to do a decade's worth of work, kind of, getting to a place where I felt that I was ready to kind of step in and share. And I think that this was kind of the perfect timing. I felt a real, like a, just a piece about, this is the time, this is the moment. And, I would say that was kind of generally in the last year and a half. And we were more intentful with, our approach and pushing this agenda of wanting to publish in the last year and a half as compared to like how we have been in the last 5 years. But yeah, it just, I think that writing a book is such a hard process. I mean, anyone who's been through that process
Yeah,
knows,
yeah.
I mean, it takes over your life. Like it's a
Hmm.
real hard process. And emotionally, I just felt like, okay, I'm ready. I'm here. I'm ready to really step in and be engulfed in this process and commit to this, journey. And
Yeah.
so that mentally, emotionally, I was ready for that. And I
Mm,
also like, I craved that connection. And so, and I knew in order to get to that place of feeling connected to my community, I was going to have to open up the door. And I feel like a lot of times social media, stepping into those vulnerable moments on social media can kind of feel like you're just like communicating, whereas instead of connecting. And that's why I wanted to reserve these stories for a sacred place, like my book, and in order to, then be able to have some of these more powerful connecting conversations online.
mm. That's awesome. That's really cool. Now, would you so looking through this book, I feel like you're very intentional about, first off, there's a lot of pictures and it's very visually stimulating and just really easy to read. And so I think it's, probably visual design background, like kind of from Instagram, from the blog, all that kind of flowing into this of having great
Mhm.
content, but that's also engaging and easy to read. And so all that to say, or all that to ask is, I mean, I think this would be considered a memoir, but it
Mhm.
also
Yeah.
feels like it has, like there's very specific actionable things, and you could do a good job of like kind of blocking that out, where it's, okay, here's how this story will be helpful for you. How, what was your intention behind that, and how did you balance that? Because I think sometimes people will just go heavy memoir, this is my
Uh-huh.
story, or heavy self-help, and I want to weave in maybe a couple stories where they're helpful,
Mhm.
but just from going through the book, it feels like there's a good kind of through line on both sides. How'd you do that?
Yeah. So, the first meeting with my publisher, I presented two ideas. I presented a memoir and I presented a coffee table book. And the more we talked about it as a team, the more it kind of was clear because I kept saying I want the reader I want there to be takeaways. I want there to be like actionable things that they can take away, solutions that we're providing or that I'm lending just from my journey that I've learned. I didn't want to feel like I was just telling my story, but also placing like little bits of like little nuggets of like, this is what got me through. This is what helped me here. Here's my, shortcut to getting XYZ. So but I didn't want it to feel like how to or cheesy, because I wanted it to have that depth and that emotion of being able to tell my story. So it was really a fine balance. But the more we talked about it as a team, we kind of realized that it was going to be this hybrid. And design's always been really important to me. It's a big part of Happily Gray, my brand. And I think people expect that from me. And so we decided it would be like half memoir, half coffee table. It would have design elements to it. And so we kind of had this foundation, this like outlook of like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then I got into the process, I started writing, and it definitely lended more memoir. It definitely lended more intimate than I think what any of us really thought. But, that's also part of the journey. I leaned into that. That was like what was seeming to flow the most naturally. And then the way my book is structured, it's 12 chapters of short stories followed by sections of keepsakes. And the keepsakes are really short. They are kind of the fun takeaway pieces of it. So it's important to me that there was like a little bit of that solution takeaway moment for the reader, so that we're offering them something, not just telling my story, but they're able to apply that in their lives, if they want. And so it was important that was the structure. So that's kind of how we approached it. And I had a co-writer who helped me through this process. Because the one thing I will say is writing a book is very, very different than a blog post or journaling or copywriting for Instagram or, whatever it is. It takes a village. Like it takes a lot of dedication, takes a lot of time. And stepping into this author role and my first time at this, that was invaluable. Her name is Shannon Miller. And she's this angel on earth. The connection we had, it was just divine and God sent. But she was such a pivotal role in kind of help coaching me through this process and helping me structure with editing and helping me really bring these stories to life. And that was just a tremendous piece to the puzzle for me.
That's great. You mentioned that writing a great book is different from blogging. It's different from, social media posts and stuff, which are your background. Hey, Chandler Bolt here. I hope you're loving this episode so far. It's time to go from inspiration to implementation. All right, so if you've learned something, we want to help you implement what you've learned with your book. So what I want you to do right now is go to selfpublishing.com/schedule, book a publishing consultation with one of the experts on my team. We'll talk about your goals for your book, your dreams, your challenges, your next steps, and we'll start putting together a plan. All right, so go to selfpublishing.com/schedule, book a call with the team. Let's see how we can help with your book. It's time to implement. What did you learn in that process, and how do you see those as different?
So, to this point, I have not really stepped into that vulnerability like I did in my book. My brand to this point has been, more surface. We do a lot of brand partnerships. We talk a lot about beauty and fashion. And so, this was the first moment of really stepping into that vulnerability. So that was really one of the most challenging aspects at first was, being comfortable in that space and kind of like continue to push myself and dig deeper, to be able to really like stretch and give it all of the emotional and mental capacity and energy that it deserved. That was one of the toughest parts, that I had to kind of adapt to and get used to, because that's not used. I don't generally share that. It's more of like, how to dress in this way, how to do this, how to do that, and it's more surface stuff, stuff that's like more about discovery and inspiring. So this was a totally different approach. I was telling my story. I was like peeling back the layers of my heart. So there was some soul searching, because I would kind of get into it and I would be doing it. And then my head, and in my like more of my business hat comes on, and then you kind of lose the essence. And so then I have to remind
Mm,
myself, wait, put that aside. This is your heart. This is the
mm.
other side of the story. So it was, like it took me a bit to get into that rhythm.
I feel like especially for people that are writing a memoir about personal life experience, it's so relatable
Mhm.
because it's sometimes it's free. I call it free therapy. I mean,
Wait,
it's a therapeutic process
totally.
of distilling what do I really think, because I'm writing it into text that will then
Mhm.
be for a while. And so I guess my
Absolutely.
follow-up to that would be, how did you do that? And any thoughts for people who are maybe wrestling with that same thing of like, okay, I want to dive deeper and be more vulnerable in my writing. It's
Mhm.
difficult. I've got my business hat on. I've got my like
Mhm.
this soul searching that needs to happen. How did you do that? Anything you learned that would be helpful for folks?
Yeah, for sure. So you're right, that is the hard part. And I will say, so just something simple. I always wrote in the same place in my house. We have this little like it's not a screened in porch, but there's a lot of natural light. There's a lot of windows, and we call it our music room. Neither of us are musicians. I don't know why we call it the music room, but I had that was like a peaceful place in our house. It was a quiet place, and I always wrote in that room. And so that, that even alone, like having that like place where you can go and kind of put it all aside, to stepping more in the vulnerability. You're right. You're 100% right when you say it's therapeutic. I had friends while I was writing the book and in the process that would ask me like, how are you doing? How's it going? What is it like? And I would tell them, I'm like, I'm in therapy right now, like stepping back into these stories and reliving these moments. I talk about my divorce. I talk about just a lot of heavy moments. And it really was like, wow, my mood would kind of, while we were in that specific chapter, my mood would be reflective of where I was. Cause you really have to go back in time and relive those moments in order to be able to write
Mm,
about them in that
mm,
way, to go that deep and to peel back the layers. And so yeah, it was like therapy. I did go to therapy through this
mm,
process. That also helped, and
mm,
being able to stay connected with the process and to trust the process. And the other thing I'll say is, so at the time I was writing this book, we were also launching my skincare brand, Nema, and I was 4 months postpartum with my second child. So life was crazy. I had a 2-year-old and like a 4-month-old. And then we were launching this other company. I was writing this book. It just kind of all happened at once. Did not plan for it to, but it was just, life was so crazy. And I felt so stretched to the max. And I, halfway through the book in October, I took 5 days off, and I went to this place called Onsite, which is 60 miles outside of Nashville. I'm not sure if you heard of it, but I did this like, it was this group therapy, and a lot of it is like deep soul searching work, recentering. And that was invaluable to me, to be able to get through this process and stay connected. Cause that was the hard part. Cause I, alongside of writing this book, I still had a company to run. And so you're kind of juggling a lot. You're in the like the emotional trenches with this book, but then you also I have to pop out and do all of this like more day-to-day business work. So
yeah.
that really helped, and I think, whether it's therapy, whether it's a friend, whether you can take 3 days to go do a program. I had a friend that was also writing a book at the same time. She did a creative program that was really focused on connecting creatively to her book.
Mm,
That really helped in the process of writing. That this is the type of book she was writing. So I think that you really have to be mindful of having those things in place, because the
mm,
process can be so draining and so
yeah.
emotional, if it's if it's that type of book.
Yeah. Wow. Kind of juggling a lot. I mean, a 4-month old, a 2-year old,
It was
launching a new
nuts.
brand and writing a book. That's, holy
It was
cow.
nuts.
That's a
It was
lot
nuts.
more
Like,
than kind of juggling a lot.
it all fell
You're a
it all fell
superhero.
into the same, it all kind of happened at the same time. And but
That's
I will
incredible.
say, writing this book was such a joy. Like, it was such a joy. I mean, it truly was therapy. There was it was just, it was a lovely process. And I'm so thankful. Like, I'm just so thankful that I got to go through that journey. It was my favorite time of the day. And also getting to be with Shannon, my co-writer that I was with,
Mm,
like just the synergy we had. And so I have a deep gratitude for the process of it
that's
all. And
cool. You mentioned a piece that I thought was really interesting. I haven't considered before. I talked about a book as free therapy, but then you talked about also
mm,
going through therapy while you're writing the book as a way to almost improve your writing. Were you going through that beforehand?
mhm.
Um, and then also, was there any particular process that was helpful? Like, were you going there to talk about stories that you were then going to be writing about? Was it just more organic life stuff? Like, how did those two kind of dovetail together?
Yeah. So I've always, not, I wouldn't say consistently done therapy, try to, but I'm the person that like, I'll go consistently for, 3 months. And then I get kind of like, then I'm like 1 month, one every couple of months. But through this process, and I didn't plan this, but when I started writing this book, I was going to therapy and I realized how much that was helping the process, helping me get through these deeper, darker chapters. And even the ones that having to go back to my childhood that were beautiful to write, like it was helping me kind of along that journey. And so I started going consistently. So it wasn't something new that I adapted. I was just more consistent with it through writing the year that it took to write this book. And so I just would highly recommend it. I would go once a week, and yeah, we would talk about specifically where I was with that, because that was also, again, like to write, to really peel back the layers, you have to be there and show up emotionally. And so
Mm,
that was what we ended up talking about in my therapy sessions, and kind of going back to, and the discovery aspect of it. Like when I was writing about my divorce, discovering more pieces to the story as that was 12 years ago. And now I'm 35, and I'm reliving it again with a new perspective. And so there
mm,
was kind of a discovery element to a few of these chapters that I was like, wow, okay. And that's the cool process about life. You go through with each decade, you have new perspective that life gives you.
yeah.
And so reflecting back on these stories as I relive them, it
Mm.
really, yeah, we talked about it in therapy a lot.
That's cool. You said that these therapy sessions, that reminds me of NF. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Um,
Wait,
he has this album and song called Therapy Sessions, and then it talks
uh-huh.
kind of the song is about how a lot of his songs are therapy sessions in these writing
Mm,
sessions. So it's interesting to see those parallels between music and
mm.
books. I mean, I don't know if you knew this or if I mentioned this, but my brother plays in a Grammy-nominated rock and roll band called Need to Breathe. They're based out of
Oh,
Nashville. Um,
wait, who's your brother?
Seth Bolt, bass
Okay.
player, long hair.
Yes, I don't know him specifically, but I know Wilder,
Yeah,
who's the,
cool.
the
Yeah.
lead. Yeah.
Bear.
I've
Yep.
actually Bear, yeah. I've done wait, his son's name are Wilder and Woods. That's right. And now
Yep.
his new gig is Wilder Woods. Yeah.
Waterwoods. Yep.
Bear is amazing, and his wife Mary and I
Yep.
are friends, but they're
Oh, cool.
incredible.
I didn't know that. That's awesome. Small
Mhm.
world. Well, it's
Yeah.
always cool to look at those kind of those connections. That's why I'm always really curious about those connections between music and books and stuff. That's really
For
cool.
sure.
Small world. Hey, couple more questions for you. I'm curious
Mhm.
about. So you were very intentional about including pictures and images in the book, and specifically color pictures.
Mhm.
And this is obviously a big advantage of traditional publishing. And my experience a lot of times with self-publishing, it's just so cost prohibitive that it doesn't
Sure.
make sense. And I know it's probably still has affected some of the stuff on the traditional side of things too. So what was that a non-negotiable for you? If so, why? And was there anything that made like more difficult? Or I think it obviously affected the pricing strategy and all that stuff. But any lessons
Definitely.
learned from that or thoughts on that?
Definitely. So it was a non-negotiable for me because that's such a big part of my brand. My brand is rooted in content creation and the picture. And so I wanted there to be some visual aspect to this book. And I also wanted to be able to share pictures with my audience that they've never seen before. So 60% of this book is unpublished, unseen content that we've been capturing either from childhood and pictures I've never shared, or that we've captured in the last 2 years. Because that's just such a big part. That's the heart of my brand. And I think that's what people expect. And a big part of, the way we shoot and the way, the lighting and just the creative behind the pictures, I hope tells a story. And that's kind of been how we've always approached the visual aspect of my brand is yes, the words are important, but so is the picture. We want people to look at these pictures and to feel and to have that emotional response to it. So yeah, it's layered with a good amount of pictures. I will say the first time, so I was like very involved in the design side of the book as well. I worked like hand in hand with the design team, and I mean, back and forth midnight, like with all the edits, back and forth, all the little details. And we started with like triple the amount of pictures. And the first time I got to step back and read the book for joy, we deleted like 60% of them, because I was like, okay, now this is taking away from the process of reading the book and the
Ah,
experience of being able to really let these stories have a moment. And so, yeah, that was just kind of a learning curve too, of like, what is the perfect balance, and what feels like enough to give the visual, element to tell that story, but then not to take away from the words. So that was a learning curve for sure. And
that's
with what
awesome.
you're saying, it is costly to print in color. And so that was kind of one of those upfront conversations, because I worked with a publisher on the, and we had a deal structure there. That was one of the things from the beginning, I was like, this is really, really important to me. And I think it's important to the success of this book.
That's awesome. Last couple questions I have for you. I'd love to shift gears a bit to the marketing side of things. What are the 2 or 3 things that you're really focused on to market the book successfully?
So we're doing a podcast book tour, which is
Here we are.
amazing. That's why I'm here. Yeah, exactly. We're also doing, thank goodness, post-pandemic, we're doing a physical book tour, which I'm really excited about. We're doing 8 cities. And I think this book is, the heart of it is about connection. So I'm excited that we are able to have those moments in person with women. We are some of the smaller, which I think are really strategic, is a book club. So we have a group of 200 people that we are creating exclusive content for. They have free digital copies that they've gotten to read up front, and they're helping like with reviews and helping to kind of be my champion this book and be my crew. And so that's been really cool. We also hired a book PR that has helped specifically with book coming into this process of kind of not knowing a lot about how to successfully market a book. They have been an asset there to kind of guide us through this process. And a lot of that has been more, it's more press focused. So they're helping with things like paid media around social posts to help boost things. And then also with our book tour, we're targeting specific cities while we're there with that paid media. And then which it'll be interesting. I'm not there yet, so it'll be interesting to see, the response, how big of a difference that makes. We're about to start that process, so it'll be interesting to see the resources that are going into it. What really is, moves the needle. On my social, we're doing things like weekly chapter summaries. I mean, the theme right now is all about the book, where I'm speaking directly in stories about the book, sharing
Oh, cool.
the moments, trying to really create the conversation. And my internal team has a full calendar of events that kind of happen, giveaways, like intimate Q&As. We have different lives with special guests where we're talking about either topics of the book like motherhood and business and whatnot. And so we've layered in some of those moments as well. So I don't know, we'll see. We've got a lot going on and trying a lot of different things. I will say the last thing we're doing is, instead of leaning so heavily on social media, we are trying to connect with community groups of women in the cities on our book tour. So like, I think social media, the algorithm is so frustrating, and there's a lot of people have such limited access to see my content. So we're really trying to connect with different organizations and communities to bring them in, to co-hosting events with them to
Mm,
help boost our foot traffic. So
yeah.
again, this is all new and it hasn't quite gone into action yet. So we'll see how it works, but those are some of the tactics that we're using.
That's cool. Behind the scenes, you heard it here first. So we got a book tour, 8-city book tour, got PR and publicity. We've got the podcast tour. And then you talked about the book club. We call that a launch team, which I know
Launch
I
team.
mentioned. I sent you a copy of this book. Check out chapter 15.
Okay.
It's specific to launch teams. And just like there might be one or two things
Excited.
in there that as you're getting ready with the launch team that'll help, and specifically with reviews. Like
Okay.
that's a big thing, right? Getting as many of those 200 folks as possible to leave a review on day one, right out of the
Exactly.
gates. That'll
Okay.
be really helpful. I love the idea of book. I feel like with a book like yours too, I love the idea of true book clubs in the sense of you can enable, like this might be a post-launch, a week or two after the launch, but having a facilitated book club kind of curriculum, and then groups of women can buy, and because then you're selling, it's one to many, right? You're making one sale that turns into 20 or 30 sales that then sparks community around the thing. I feel like
That's cool. That's a great
Mike
idea.
Todd did a great job of that. He wrote a book called Relationship Goals. And he didn't, I mean, he's a pastor. So there's kind of that natural built in, like, all right, let's embed this into some of our community groups in the church and that sort of thing. But I feel like with especially this topic and the audience that you have, that could be, I feel like that could work really well. Yeah.
That's a great idea. I need to download the audiobook to, is it called Published?
Published. Yeah.
Published. I need to start reading that
Just
like
audio,
after this
we'll
podcast.
we'll keep the conversation going in the audiobook. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. And this should get to your house probably within the next few days, I would assume. But hey, we're almost at our time here. This has been so great. What would be kind of your parting piece of advice for the Mary Lee Lawless of years ago, or all the other Marys out there who are thinking about writing their first book, whether it be a memoir or elsewhere, kind of knowing what you know now? What would be your parting piece of advice?
I think it's supposed to be difficult, like it and to expect that and to lean into that and know that if you're struggling, if you get stuck, that's normal and that's okay. I felt that way so many times, and sometimes I had to like step away from it, put it down for a bit before I could, pick it back up and be able to feel creative enough and ready to pour into the process again. And then my other piece of advice is, depending on the structure of how you're publishing this book and the resources, I found that whether you want to have someone help with the process, there's a lot of different capacities that what that can look like. And at first, having a co-writer made me nervous. I was like, I like to control everything. This is my story. I really want to. And there is so many different ways you can structure that, the involvement level. And I will say, as a new author, having someone help me structure this book and edit this book and guide me was invaluable. So I've sang Shannon's praises several times through this podcast, but it's true. That was, as a new author embarking on this journey, that was such a big piece of the puzzle for me. I'm really glad that we had her here, and it was invaluable.
That's awesome. Well, this has been great. I just realized I've been calling you Mary Lee Lawless.
Oh, it's okay.
Mary Lawless Lee. It rolls off the tongue.
It's okay. Whatever. I'll go by whatever.
I always say, call me whatever you want, as long as you call me.
Exactly. Right.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been great, Mary. Where can people go to buy a copy of the book, to find out more about your brand and what you're up to?
So Mary Lawless Lee on social media, just my full name. And there's a link in my bio directly to the Amazon page for the book. We're also selling the book at small bookstores, big bookstores. So a lot all over: Target, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Here in Nashville, it's Parnassus. But also Shop Happily Gray is the landing book page, and that tells you a book tour. There's a book trailer you can go watch to give you a little bit more depth and background on the book, and anything that you need. It's all on that landing page.
Cool. Well, Happily Gray, stories, souvenirs, and everyday wonders from life. From the life in between Mary Lawless Lee. You can see, you can find her on Instagram or go to, you said it was shophappilygray.com directly to the
Shop
book
Happily
page.
Gray. Yes,
Awesome.
shophappilygray.com.
Well, check it out. It's engaging. It's relatable. It's got great pictures, as we talked about.
Thank you.
It's really, really cool. So Mary, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chandler. Excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you can be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. All right, number 1, I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help the podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. If you're on the fence about scheduling a publishing consultation call with my team, maybe you're not quite ready for that, I've got some free training that I think will be really helpful for you. All right, all you have to do is go to register to sign up. Go to selfpublishing.com/free training. When you do, you're also going to get a free digital copy of my new book, Published. And on that training, you're going to learn the next steps, so how to implement with your book. So how to write, how to publish, how to launch successfully. So go to register right now at selfpublishing.com/free training. I'll see you there.